Hey guys, Cody B here, bringing you a message from God's Word. Today we are continuing our study of Luke. We'll be in Luke 22. We'll be looking at verses 39 on down through verse 53. Last week we finished up the scene at the Lord's Supper, at the Last Supper. Jesus gave some final teachings, and there were other teachings that were taught, and you can see those in John and the other Gospels, but we focused on the ones in Luke, and some warnings he gave and some precautions he gave to remind the apostles what they're here for, and remind us what we're here for, what we're about, and what we should be about in our life. In this text today, Jesus leaves with the apostles. He goes to the Mount of Olives. He goes to what we know as the Garden of Gethsemane. Here he prays. He prays several times. We see this throughout the other Gospels. He separates his closest circle, and then he separates from them as well, and goes off by himself and prays. While he's praying, he's going to undergo stress. He's going to undergo anxiety. He's going to sweat blood, and we'll talk about that when we get there. Did he actually sweat blood? Did he sweat? Was his sweat so great that it was like blood? And we'll talk about that when we get there. And then it's all going to lead up to the moment where he's going to be betrayed by one of his best friends. No, he wouldn't one of the inner circle. He wasn't Peter, Andrew, James, and John. But he was one of the 12. He was one who's trusted. He was the one who carried the money bag. And Jesus is going to betray him with a symbolic act of love. There's going to be anger. There's going to be frustration from the rest of the apostles. One of them will attack. We know that to be Peter. According to the other Gospels, he's not named in Luke. And Jesus puts a stop to them all, brings it back to perspective about what his mission is, and that will conclude our lesson for today. So we'll begin in Luke chapter 22, beginning in verse 39. And he came out and proceeded as was his custom to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples also followed him. And when he arrived at the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not enter into temptation." He withdrew from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and began to pray, saying, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." He gets alone with his apostles. He goes to a place he's gone before. It says in verse 39, this is their custom. This was where they gathered. This is where they went to be alone. This is where he went throughout this week when he was done teaching the crowds and wanted to have moments with his 12. This is where he was, I believe, when he sat down and talked about the end times that we read earlier. We read a few weeks ago, where he talked about not the end times, but the destruction of the temple and the coming of the Spirit and the destruction of Jerusalem. And how he told them these are the things that will happen. And when you know that this ending is coming for Jerusalem and for the temple. This is what he had done all week, and this is what they had done previously. But this is different. See, this past week he would withdraw and he would be alone with his apostles, and now not only is he alone with his apostles, he became alone with just his 4 closest ones. And not only was he alone with the 4 closest ones, he withdrew even further. He needed alone time with God. He gave them a warning. Pray that you do not enter into temptation, because he knew what they were about to go through. He knew what Peter was about to go through. He knew what they were going to see and what they were going to do. And Jesus says, now's the time you need to pray it doesn't happen. It's interesting. Jesus, knowing is about to take place, what he's about to go through, knowing he's about to be betrayed, knowing he's about to be arrested, knowing that he's about to go on trial, knowing that he is hours away from being crucified. His concern isn't for himself. He doesn't say, pray for me because I'm about to go through an ordeal. Pray for me because I'm about to suffer. He doesn't say, pray for me because this is going to be hard. He says, look after yourself. And I'm not saying it's wrong to ask people to pray for you. No, it's just I want us to look at what Jesus was worried about. Knowing what was facing him, he still had concern for his friends. It showed, and while we see here, he's asking God, take this cup from me. Don't let me go through this. This is going to be hard. He still had concern for his people. He still had concern for his believers. He still had concern for his disciples. Father, take this cup from me, but don't let my will, but your will be done. Father, I don't want this. If there's any other way, take it away from me so that we can do this another way. But if this is what you want, this is what we'll do. It says in verse 43, an angel from heaven appeared from him, strengthening him. It's just to show him that his father was listening, his father was paying attention, that he had the Father's attention upon him, the Father's care, and that at that moment, being in agony, verse 44, being in agony, he was praying very fervently, and his sweat became like drops of blood falling down upon the ground. Well, what does that mean? Was it like blood? Was it just big sweat drops that looked like blood drops? I believe he's in a very literal way sweating blood here. I believe it's a very blood mingled with sweat. It's a condition we see in humans. We've recorded it. You can Google it yourself. It's called hematidrosis. It's just a process where someone sweats blood. And while there is skin conditions that call this, while there is diseases that cause this, it's been known to happen when someone undergoes great stress. It's rare for that to happen, but it does take place. Ask yourself this: how much stress was Jesus under in this scene? How much stress was he under in this moment? A lot. More than I've ever had. It goes to show us and show the apostles and us believers today. He knew what was about to happen. This text begins to tell us the emotional state of Jesus Christ at the time of the crucifixion. And it starts here with stress and anxiety on his mind and in his heart. Yeah, he was scared. He was stressed. He didn't want this. But he knew it was the only way. He didn't want it, and he knew it would be awful. He knew he was going to suffer. But he knew it was the only way to save you and to save me. Verse 45, when he rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping from sorrow, and said to them, why are you sleeping? Rise and pray, that you may not enter into temptation. Jesus says, wake up. You guys, you don't understand what's about to happen. This is going to be rough on you. This is going to be hard for you. Pray that you do not enter into temptation, knowing that he's just sweating blood and sweating like great drops of blood, and sweat was pouring from his forehead because of the stress that he's under. Once again, who does he show concern for? His apostles, his disciples, his believers, his followers. Make sure and pray you do not enter into temptation. In verse 47, while he was still speaking, he was giving that sentence, giving that warning, and this is what started happening as he was speaking. While he was still speaking, behold, a multitude came. And the one called Judas, one of the 12, was preceding him, and he approached Jesus to kiss him. And Jesus said to him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? He's warning his apostles as Judas approaches him, and it says there's a multitude around him. We know from the other Gospels that this was planned out by Judas, that he told the guards that came to arrest Jesus that you'll know which one it is when I go up to him and I kiss him. They see the multitude. We know them to be guards. We know them to be armed, and we'll see that in this text. Could you imagine the apostles thinking to themselves, what's going on? Why are they here? How do they know to come here? Why are they so armed? And Jesus calls out the betrayal of Judas in verse 48. Verse 49, and when those who were around him saw that he was what was going to happen, they said, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? These are the apostles. They just recently purchased a sword, and a few verses earlier we looked at last week, and when they saw Jesus being arrested, and they saw these men who were armed, and they saw that Judas was betraying them, I almost could see one of them touching their sword. Should we fight back? Lord, do you want us to attack? Shall we strike with the sword? What's going on? Do you want us to fight them? And a certain one of them, who didn't ask, and we know this to be Peter based on the other Gospels, a certain one of them struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus answered and said, stop. No more of this. And he touched the ears and healed him. We know this to be a guard. We know this to be a servant based on the other Gospels. We know it was Peter who cut off the ear. We know it was Peter who pulled the sword to attack. We know it was him who stepped up to the plate, and it was Jesus who rebuked him. The apostles are going, should we attack? Should we defend ourselves? Should we defend you? And Peter, without asking, just goes for it. Jesus reminds them, this isn't our way. This isn't our kingdom. This isn't our movement. This isn't this type of thing. That's not how we do. I believe one of the temptations that Jesus was warning them against, they fell right into. This isn't how we act. That's not how we live. Jesus takes the ear and heals the man and cures him of the ear that had been cut off. And Jesus said to the chief priests and the officers of the temple and elders who had come against him, have you come out with swords and clubs as against a robber? These are the ones Jesus had been teaching. These are the ones that Jesus had rebuked recently in the temple and in Jerusalem. And Jesus looks up and says, why do you come at me with weapons? I've only ever used words. I'm not a robber. I'm not a murderer. I'm not a thief. Why do you come at me like I'm some dangerous person? The only thing I've ever done is healed. I was with you daily in the temple. Verse 53. You did not lay hands on me, but this hour and the power of darkness are yours. He said in the daylight, in the afternoon, in the temple, in front of everyone, you could have done this. Yet you've chosen now. You've chosen to use your power at the time of night, at the time of darkness. And I want to point this out. During the Passover. Treachery was performed against the life of Jesus Christ. He had been betrayed. He knew he was going to be murdered. He was undergoing great stress. One of his best friends betrayed him. To men who hated him, and it was the beginning. A beginning of the series of events that would lead to the torture and execution of Jesus Christ. A series of events that would lead to his sacrifice. So that these apostles that are with him, so that these men who are killing him, and so that me and you could have the opportunity to choose eternal life. It's glorious. It's beautiful. It's sad. He was a perfect man. We've gone through the Gospel of Luke, and we've not looked at one sin he has committed. And yet they chose to murder him. May God bless, and I hope you have a wonderful day.